every now and then somebody comes into your life and they change your life, you know. And Kevin came into our lives and he changed our lives, man. He introduced us to this wonderful path that we've been on, you know, and meditation and discovering mindfulness and discovering this mind of love, or the Christians would call it God of love, that runs underneath of all of us, and being able to get near that. It's been such a special gift, you know. And so I'm so grateful, man, that I picked up that magazine and found you, you know. And you're a dear friend. And I got to tell you, with these Dharma teachers, man, or any kind of teacher, I got to feel them before I hear them, right? If I can't feel you, if I don't relate to you as a human being, if I can't feel your frailties and your humanness, then I can't hear you. You're just a lecturer, right? This guy, from the time I picked up One Breath at a Time, when I read that first chapter, I could feel this guy, man, you know, and he was my brother. Yeah, when I read that first chapter, you know. So, so grateful, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Harry. Best introduction ever. Thank you. So I think that's a good idea, an hour, don't you think we should? Then I won't have to give nearly as long a talk. That would be great. Well, we will. Let's do some meditation. I'll give a little guidance and kind of get us started. And I think we'll probably do about 20 minutes, actually, because we don't have too much time tonight. Just settling into your posture, sitting in a way that you can be balanced and upright and relaxed, the sense of ease. And letting the attention settle in the body, feeling your presence here in this space. And letting the body soften. And just noticing any points of tension in the body, and seeing if you can breathe into those places and release. And sitting with a sense of openness, of receptivity. So that as sounds arise, they just are met with awareness. No resistance, just allowing. Noticing too what's present for you emotionally or energetically. So what did you bring with you tonight? And sometimes we have the idea that we'll start meditating and our day should just disappear. But oftentimes, if there's been some turmoil or agitation, it comes right into our sitting. So to just acknowledge that and give it space without trying to suppress or indulge, not trying to solve a problem, just to feel what's here for you right now. And trust that your own awareness can hold this, all your experience, and that no matter what, it will come and it will go. Nothing to fear, nothing to hold on to, nothing to push away. And letting the attention then come to rest with the breath. So again, not pushing away any other experience, but letting the breath come into the foreground of your awareness. Feeling the breath either at the nostrils, the touch sensation of air coming in and going out of the body, or if that's not a place where the mind can settle, following the breath at the belly, just feeling the movement rising and falling. We're not trying to control the breath or manipulate, not trying to create any special experience. Just begin by allowing the breath to be as it is, and investigating that, feeling that very simple experience. We step out of the intellectual world into the visceral, felt world, where there aren't words, not calculations, judgments or analyses, just being, just presence. Something very primal. Letting go into that presence. Resting in that presence. It's natural that the mind will wander. So part of our process is to come back. At that moment of realizing that the mind is caught up again in thinking, it's a very valuable moment. It's a moment of waking up. And in that moment we can transform the agitation or busyness of the mind into letting go, into coming back to peace. So when we notice that we're thinking or lost in some dream, we acknowledge that, but then also feel that. That feeling is what we call dukkha, the thoughts that wish for something to be different, as most thoughts do. We feel that, and as we come back to the breath and to the moment, we feel the release of that. This is what the Buddha talks about. He talks about how we create suffering and how we let go of suffering. And we can feel it. in real time, in this very subtle way, as the mind and body settle back again. Find that natural ease that we all seek. To enjoy that moment of release. Become absorbed in that. So first, I just want to thank Irene and all the Insight San Diego folks for having me here and putting together this weekend. When I sit here meditating and watch my own mind, then I start to wonder if I really should be teaching anything. But fortunately, you can't see all of that, so I'll try to fake it. I live in Berkeley, and so I often think, why don't I go to San Diego more? Because it's nice down here. It's not bad up there, I like it. But we came down here a couple years ago to look at UCSD for my daughter, but she wound up going to UC Berkeley, so what can I say? That's my alma mater, so I'm not sad. I want to just do a little marketing first. The Kevin Griffin marketing department, they've asked me to say a few things. I'm holding a retreat, a Buddhism 12-step, 5-day intensive meditation retreat in Northern California, the beginning of October at Vajrapani Institute. It's the 14th annual, and much like Harry was talking about, it's a similar retreat. We do a certain amount of workshop, but it's mostly a silent retreat. It's from October 3rd to the 8th, so there's flyers up here. There are also books in the back, and I just released an audio book of one of my best-known book, One Breath at a Time. It's on audible.com or Audible Books, and that was a lot of work. If you ever have the opportunity to record an audio book, don't do it. Let somebody else do it. It's really boring. And we're going to have a day long here, somewhere in this facility, right, tomorrow, from 9 to 4. And that's going to be on the topic that I'm addressing tonight, but more elaborated. And then on Sunday, I'm going to be at Dharma Bums, which is somewhere else. Where is it? People know where it is? Hillcrest? Okay, it sounds like it's on the crest of a hill. Or that's just the name of the street, yeah. And that's going to be more of a recovery-oriented day. I guess we're going to have 10 to 12, there's something, and then 2 to 5. It's all on a website somewhere, Dharma Bums. Dharma Bums. Just think Jack Kerouac. There was a book, Dharma Bums, right? They stole that name. I wonder if Jack is... Oh, no, that's right. He can't sue them. He's dead. I have been working for a while on what's turning into a book. I hoped it would be a book for about a year and a half that I've been calling Living Kindness, Buddhist Teachings for a Troubled World. Though I might change the subtitle, but Living Kindness is the main title. And as that suggests, if probably most of you are familiar with the Buddhist practice of loving kindness, and I wanted to talk about that, not just the practice, but the life of trying to follow what the Buddha taught about what's called in the Pali language metta, M-E-T-T-A. I guess partly because I have a cynical side. It takes up actually about 3/4 of me is about the cynical side. It's a little weighted. I sometimes get skeptical about how people approach loving kindness. A few years ago, I was teaching a course at St. Mary's College. They have a January term that I get to teach an intensive introduction to Buddhism, 4 days a week, 2.5 hours a day, and I grade them. It's really interesting trying to grade people on their meditation. Let me see. But part of the course, I have them, actually, the way I grade them on their meditation is I had them journal each day about their experience. They have to meditate in class. We meditate in class, but then they have to meditate at home or wherever they happen to be during the day. And at one point during the course, I introduced them to the loving kindness practice, which involves sending loving kindness to yourself, to a benefactor, to dear ones, to a neutral person, to a difficult person or persons, and then radiating to all beings. And what I found after a couple days was that in their journaling, they seemed to only be sending loving kindness to people the dear ones, people they loved, their family, their friends, their pets, And I said, guys, that's not the practice. That's easy. We don't really have to cultivate loving kindness for people we already love. That's not difficult. The challenge is facing particularly the difficult people. And the neutral person can be tricky too, as well as just radiating to all beings and having compassion for everybody, even the people, who don't deserve it. But, yeah. And so my skeptical side said, I wonder if more people do this than just my college students, maybe this is how people use this practice. And I understand that. I mean, it feels good to send loving kindness to people you love, and I'm not opposed to people feeling good when they meditate. Sometimes there's not enough of that, right? We can get into a very negative attitude, all I do is my mind wanders, I'm so bad at this, and I'm so restless. And instead of kind of relaxing and enjoying it, we can get into making meditation into a project, right? But there needs to be a balance, right? Because if we're just doing meditation to feel good, and we're not really developing insight, particularly if we're not looking at the challenging aspects, and particularly what the Buddha talked about. So much of what he talked about, when you look at the suttas, isn't loving kindness so much as what he says, non-ill will. So, we see in many suttas where he points to working with your aversion. And, underlying that idea is the principle that if we remove ill will, that what's left actually is loving kindness, is already there. It's not, I don't think we have to import loving kindness. I think we already have it in us, in the same way that we already have awareness in us. We just have to remove the obstructions to it, right? So this idea of non-ill will, which is not it doesn't have the same zing as come and practice loving kindness, come and practice non-ill will. We'll spend a day not hating people. It's hard to market that. Again, the marketing department, they're always trying to find ways to, sell the Dharma. It's one of my pet peeves, is the pictures of Dharma teachers. They're always smiling. And I was saying this today, and if you're depressed and you're meditating, and you're I guess I'm not really a good meditator because I'm not happy. I guess I'm doing it wrong. And then we add on to our depression more judgment, which always helps with the depression, So I'm just a little, I don't know, come and meditate and you'll be happy. So really not the point of my talk tonight at all, but just came up. So I told Irene that I don't really kind of script my talks, and that's becoming very apparent. So let's kind of go back to the beginning a little bit here, the beginning of loving kindness, which, first of all, to me, there's two key questions. One is, why do we call it loving kindness? And two is, what is love? And we can probably just spend the evening on those two things. We'll see if we get past that. So the Buddha calls this, what we call loving kindness, metta. It's a very simple 5-letter word. And we apparently don't have a word in our language I'll say our language, English. It's not we don't have a word in the English language for that because we have to use a compound, loving kindness. And I'm debating, this is a struggle, a copy editing question, whether to put a hyphen in there. But any of the copy editors in the audience can chime in on that later. So, you would think if you said love, that would be enough, right? But it turns out that in our language, there's a reason I'm trying to not say our language, because I don't want to assume that everyone here, that's your first language. In the English language, love can mean a lot of different things, Making love has come to mean having sex, although I think during my parents' era it meant something like flirting or dancing with Fred Astaire. It's something along those lines, because let's make love. They had all those songs. I don't think they meant like that's. Anyway, so we know you can have sex without love. Maybe you didn't know that, but I'm letting you know. So hopefully you're not. Thich Nhat Hanh would not approve. So okay, then love can mean something other than kindness, right, or caring. And you can love chocolate, So we had to add this other word, kindness, so that you would know that we were talking about the kind of love that's kind, not the other kind of love that isn't kind, loving kindness. Doesn't quite, capture, I think, the meaning of the word. When the Buddha talks about it, the famous description in the Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness, he says, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So many teachers, and I encountered this particularly with Asian monastic teachers. One in particular, Ajahn Jumnian said, I heard him say, metta is mother love. And that's that's a beautiful image, and it communicates something very powerful. But when we look at what the Buddha is saying about that, he's not saying even as a mother cuddles and squeezes her child because she loves him so much. He's saying even as a mother protects with her life her child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. That's a kind of ferocious love. It's like the kind of, the mother of the bear mother protecting her bear cubs, that kind of love. Oh, whoa, well, that doesn't sound like, it sounds kind of angry or something, it's kind of scary. And she protects with her life. This is pretty intense. Like if we take that literally, we're supposed to, well, I don't know. This is going a little far, but we could say that means that we should protect everybody. We're willing to die for anybody, right? It's not, that's not quite what the Buddha is saying. But what I think he's saying is that we should care for everybody. Not like them, but that we should take care of everybody. Just like a mother takes care. A mother, a father takes care of their child. We protect our child. So this brings me to the question of love, of defining love, but seeing that love is not just liking someone, or, I want to talk about self-love, because this is the first thing that we start with, right? In the formal loving kindness practice, we have to start with loving ourselves. And, even as a mother protects with her life, so how do we protect ourselves? What does that mean to protect yourself? So there's another sutta, a very short sutta, and it's been misunderstood to suggest, people will say, the Buddha said, everybody deserves love equally. Like, everybody deserves love as much as everyone else. So, and this is something I've heard Dharma teachers say this as a way of conveying to people that they shouldn't hate themselves. That you deserve love as much as anyone. Of course, the idea that you would hate yourself is kind of an odd one in itself. And there was a famous moment when a Western Buddhist asked the Dalai Lama about this, and he couldn't understand that in Tibetan. There was no Tibetan concept of self-hate. And he apparently had this on-stage kind of argument with his translator. That's my best Tibetan, And finally, he kind of gets it, and he just turns to the student and says, "Don't do that." Okay, good, I got it, But so I think the reason that people struggle with this when the teacher says, okay, practice loving kindness for yourself, is that they think that means they have to qualify or deserve love, and that because they know that they're imperfect and that they do stupid things, say stupid things, think really stupid things, unkind things, all the things that we do as flawed human beings, they think, oh, I don't deserve it. I haven't earned that love for myself. So this sutta, where this is brought up, these two characters who appear pretty often in the suttas, King Pasenadi and Queen Malika, who were royalty of the Buddha's time, and I think he was the king of Kosala, and the Buddha spent a lot of time in Kosala, and Queen Malika was particularly a follower of his, and so in this, it's a very short sutta. King Pasenadi says to Queen Malika, "Is there anybody that you love more than yourself?" And when I read that, I think, he's fishing, Because when a husband says to his wife, do you love anybody more than yourself, honey? Can you think of anybody? And Queen Malika doesn't take the bait. Now, this is totally this part of it's my interpretation, so there's no scholars will back me up on this, But I understand human nature, and I'm married too, so most of the scholars are monks. They don't really get it. So Queen Malika says, "No, there's no one that I hold more dear than myself. What about you, King Pasenadi?" Then King Pasenadi, of course, if I were King Pasenadi, I'd be like, well, I'm not going to tell her that I love her more than myself. But anyway, he says, yeah, me too. I love myself. There's no one that I love more than myself. So they agree on this. And then they go to see the Buddha, and they tell him what they've decided, what they've kind of arrived at. And he says, that's really good. I'm gonna use that. I don't know if he says that exactly, but he kind of says that's really good. And then he says, and no one who truly loves themselves can harm another, because if you know that everyone loves themselves the way you love yourself, you couldn't harm them. Because it'd be like, wow, it'd be harming someone who loves themselves in the same way that I love myself. In a way, this is kind of just the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto yourself, which also sort of implies that you love yourself, right? So the problem with this is, as I say, that in our culture, the implication that you love yourself, it's almost like you're bragging. Like, I'm just great, I love myself. So, that image is really frowned upon in our culture. In fact, there's some public figures that seem to exhibit that to a high degree that we find off-putting, seems to be all about loving themselves and not loving others. But if we look at what the Buddha is talking about, protect with your life, if we think of, rather than loving myself as like, I'm great, and boy, I'm so smart and I'm so good looking, that's not what he's saying. That what he's saying is that on this very basic level, we care for ourselves first and foremost. When I'm hungry, I get something to eat. I feed myself. I take care of myself. When I'm thirsty, I get something to drink. When I'm tired, I rest. If someone attacked me, I protect myself. Right? This, I think, is more what the Buddha is talking about as metta, caring for people. When you care for a child, you're not always going, oh, you're so cute, I love your poop. And I love it when you scream and yell and wake me up in the middle of the night. It's hard to love a child, but we protect a child because that's our responsibility, and because they're part of us, of course. And the same way, we take care of ourselves, even if I'm, feeling like I was really a jerk and did something really stupid. I'll still have dinner. I won't be like, you're not getting dinner because you were mean to that person. I don't punish myself, right? So I still take care of myself. And this kind of makes it easier for me to think of metta as not something I have to earn, but that on this very primal level, it's a natural and organic thing that I do, that I care for myself and I take care of myself. And then so doing loving kindness for myself then doesn't feel like, okay, I've earned it, I'll pat myself on the back. I was at an event at the Berkeley Buddhist monastery a few months ago where there's a group of nuns who live in Northern California now, and they come to the monastery once a month. And they were just having a very informal tea, and people were asking them some questions. And one of the people asked one of the nuns how she practices loving kindness. What's her metta practice like? And she says, well, mostly what I do with metta is I try to give kindness to my own pain, to my own, I think emotional pain. That was how I heard it. Like when I'm feeling upset or I'm sad or anxious, then I send metta. I try to bring kindness to that. And I thought, yeah, it's the same thing. It's caring for yourself. It's not saying, oh, I shouldn't be in this bad mood. What's wrong with me? Right? That seems to be kind of the way our culture is. Like, I'm so flawed. I'm such a bad person because I'm sad or I'm angry. It's like, no. Instead of that as a mother protects her child, if I'm being a mother to that emotion, that feeling, I bring kindness to it. Oh, I bring compassion to it. I see that there's suffering within me. And so my natural response as a caring parent is to send kindness to it, not to judge it or get angry with it. And that's kind of how I approach my meditation practice, with this attitude of kindness towards myself. That because it's so often people, that they'll say, oh, I had such a bad meditation, my mind was all over the place. And it's like, so you think you should be punished because you're not getting it, like scoring a high enough grade on the mindfulness test, that you're, like, this isn't a test, This is meant to be an opportunity to be kind to yourself. And actually, if you just took the time to sit down and be quiet for a few minutes today, wow, you passed the test, flying colors, because there are very few people in the world who do that kindness to themselves, and you set aside that time, and then you spent the whole time, planning your grocery list. Fine, that's what you needed to do at that time. That's what happened. So I think we, kind of make it. It is maybe a very Western thing, this kind of achievement and doing it right and all that stuff, and we bring that kind of ambitious and competitive quality into our meditation. And it's very hard to change that, to realize that, this is a place where that doesn't apply, where we have to learn a new attitude, a new approach to being, to ourselves. So this idea of self-hatred is an interesting one in and of itself. And I think when I read Eckhart Tolle's first book, The Power of Now, I was really struck by, mostly what I read was the beginning where he tells his story, because I like stories. And he tells the story about how he had this breakthrough. I'm sure some of you must have read that. It's pretty widespread book. But what I recall from it, and this may just be my kind of reading of it, was that he was stuck in this very negative mind state. And he had this real thought or realization that he hated himself. Or he had this, it was clear to him that he hated himself. And then he had a realization that didn't make any sense. His question was, who is hating whom? Which is really an interesting question, actually. And in that thought itself, he had this breakthrough, this kind of enlightenment experience, which he wasn't able to process for a long time. Sounds like he was homeless for a while, like he just kind of like, everything kind of just broke apart, which it sounds a lot like a koan, in the Zen tradition, like who is hating whom, and then trying to figure out in this, looking at your mind and kind of going, because it's that basic question in Buddhism of where is the I, or who is I, who am I. And that, it takes us then with this question of self-hatred into a level of insight where we can really see that our whole understanding of self kind of gets thrown up into the air, just kind of like it kind of falls apart. There is no logic to that. You would have to first find a self in there, and then you would have to find another self. It's hard enough just to find the first self, but to find the second self, you're really in trouble. So, this is just kind of the starting point of what I'm writing about, and I'll talk about the next piece of this, which is I'm kind of taking you through the main elements of this book, and the kind of the core of the book for me are these 3 suttas. All of them are in the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. And the first one I look at is a sutta about the Buddha visiting with some monks who are kind of on a retreat in the forest. And in this sutta, the way I first discovered it, the way I came upon, because there's 152 suttas in this book, I think 150 something, and it's kind of hard to navigate your way through it. When I first got this book, I just was like confused by it. And so I wanted to give a talk on loving kindness. This was quite a few years ago. And I went into the index and looked up loving kindness. And then there was one citing that said, loving kindness in action. I thought, I want to see what that is, because that sounded like it would be really useful. So in this sutta, the Buddha comes and visits these monks who are meditating in the forest. And he goes through this long dialogue there's 3 monks, and one of them is kind of the senior monk, and he goes through this long dialogue with the senior monk, asking these probing questions. But the probing questions in the beginning are all about very practical things. Starts out by asking them, are you getting alms food? Are you getting food? And it just strikes me that even that question, being preserved for 2,500 years in this religious text, that it seems like something unnecessary to cover. It's like, shouldn't we get on to the stuff that's like really about enlightenment here? Like, why do I have to know if these guys are getting fed? I mean, they must have been getting fed somehow. I don't know. That's not my problem, But the Buddha did see it as his concern. And so the question for me then right away is, well, why was this preserved? That's the first question he asked. And so this sutta is under the index of loving kindness in action. So I think, I guess the Buddha is caring for his monks. I guess this is an expression of kindness on a very basic level. He's saying, if you're not getting fed, we've got to take care of that first, because you're not going to be able to meditate if you're hungry all the time. It's okay to do some fasting now and then, but you need to have meals. And I also, there's something really beautiful about it, to see that, I think of the Buddha as this lofty figure, this heroic and mythic figure almost. He shows up, and the first thing he says, are you guys being taken care of? And it's really, I love that. I mean, I would love it if, because it kind of intimidates me to think about, well, if I ever met the Buddha, like what would happen? Like if he were to say, are you getting fed? It would make me feel kind of more relaxed right away. Like he wouldn't be like, how many hours a day are you meditating? I'd be like, But he keeps probing, and I'll read a little bit of this to you, because I find this really lovely, this conversation. So the next thing he asks is, are the 3 of you living in concord, with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes? So he wants to know if these 3 monks are getting along okay. You're not going to really get very far in your practice if you're squabbling. And it turns out that when this sutta was recorded, or the time period when it takes place, actually followed a time when the Buddha had been visiting some monks who had been squabbling. And if you come tomorrow, I'll give you the full story, because it's kind of remarkable what they were fighting about. But I'll leave that for tomorrow, because it would take me a lot. We won't get anywhere if I tell you. I'll give you everything. Anuruddha says, yes, we're blending like milk and water. And what we see in here is that the Buddha's not satisfied with any answer. He wants to know details, which again is very telling. He's not just going to let him kind of brush over. He says, well, how do you live like this? How do you live blending like milk and water? This image. He says, as to that, I think thus, it is a gain for me, it is a great gain for me that I am living with such companions in the holy life. So the first thing that Anuruddha expresses is gratitude for his companions, appreciation for that. You could call this sympathetic joy, one of the 4 Brahma Viharas. And then he says, I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards those venerable ones, both openly and privately. Well, I remember the first time I read this and I thought, there's such a thing as bodily acts of loving kindness? Because I'd always, I'd learned loving kindness as a meditation. And it was always just taught to me as a meditation. Just sit and radiate kindness. That was nice and powerful. But I also knew that, there were times when I came back from a retreat and I would get into an argument with my wife within like an hour. I'd been meditating in silence for 10 days. Everything's lovely, all this loving kindness. And you come back, it's like, what do you mean I have to take out the garbage? Come on. So I really kind of got how, wow, bodily acts of loving kindness. That's, and at the time that I read this, my daughter was also like a toddler, so this started to seem actually very useful. And he goes on to say that he maintains verbal acts of loving kindness and mental acts of loving kindness. So these are the 3 forms of karma, 3 ways that we create karma through our bodily actions, verbal, and mental actions. So, we're seeing that loving kindness operates on all these levels. And the way I speak is I can be loving or I can be not loving. The way I act and the way I think. He also says that he maintains all 3 of these, both openly and privately. So one of the things he's also expressing is that doing anonymous acts of kindness have a special value, right? And we know that, right? It's very different. It's like you do something and somebody's like, oh, thank you so much. And you kind of get that, oh, that's nice. I did something nice. I got the reward, right? But to do something nice and not have them know, then you have to just enjoy it for the sheer pleasure of knowing that you're doing an act of kindness. Now we get to really the great phrase. He says, I consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do. We are different in body, but one in mind. A beautiful phrase. We are different in body, but one in mind. And this really speaks to the human race, or living beings, or all things. We are different in body, one in mind. But again, when I read this for the first time, and I was the parent of a toddler, I thought, a lot of the time I have to set aside what I wish to do and do what this venerable one wishes to do, right? This little venerable one. And I found that very comforting, again, because, I was trained, I started to practice Buddhist practice in 1980, and in those days, what I got, and I was still mildly deluded at the time, understatement. I'm still deluded, but I was particularly deluded, I'd say, at that time. But what I understood, and I don't think this was totally my misunderstanding, the way kind of practice was taught was you got to go on retreats. Retreats, that's where it's at. You go on longer and longer retreats. And there wasn't much talk about how to live the practice, or indeed how to live kindness. And so, the idea of okay, I've got a little kid now, but now I can't meditate enough. It's easy to kind of get into this idea, well, I've lost my practice. My practice is, and I've had people say things like this, people who are parents of children, usually parents aren't parents of children. Some people consider themselves parents of dogs. That's a different thing, but people will say, oh, my practice has really fallen away because I don't really have time to sit because I'm so busy, like I'm in school or I'm taking care of my kids or something. And I'm like, it's an eightfold path, not a one-fold path. And the eightfold path includes right livelihood, and it includes loving kindness. I mean, that's implicit in the precepts to not harming. And so I realized, my practice right now is more this the practice of the householder and practicing loving kindness. And indeed, my loving kindness meditation at the time my child was small was the most powerful it's ever been. It's kind of faded now that she's in college. It's still there, but it's not the same. And so this started to really expand my understanding of what loving kindness was. This sutta was really important in that, to see, okay, loving kindness isn't just sitting there and thinking of all the beings and radiating and feeling all this warmth. It's a beautiful, beautiful, powerful practice. I'm not discounting that, but it's not enough. Loving kindness needs to be more. It needs to be something that's alive, that we bring into our lives, our actions, our speech, our relationships. And indeed, it needs to be non-ill will, so that, those people who we really struggle with, when I turn on MSNBC and obsessively watch and read, then when they go to commercial, pick up my tablet and start reading, where's my heart there? Can I feel loving kindness there? So this is where I'm really exploring and looking at, and I'm finding it just a really rich vein of Dharma to explore, to look at what the Buddha means by non-ill will, what he means by blending like milk and water. Why should I not do what these venerable ones wish to do? And this is, you could just, a marriage counselor could just be on the door. When you get there, just read that. Why should I not do what my partner wishes to do and put aside what I wish to do? And then, leave your $100. Just put that through the slot. But of course, that's not quite right either, right? Because in some relationships, one person is always setting aside what they wish to do, and the other is not. So if you come on Sunday to the recovery day, we'll talk more about that, maybe that side of it, that the problem where we give ourselves away. So this teaching, as with all Dharma teachings, must be considered as in balance, what the Buddha called the middle way. So if you're someone who tends to always set aside what you wish to do, then your practice is actually to not set aside what you wish to do and do what the other wishes to do. Because otherwise you're going to have to go to Codependence Anonymous, and you don't want to have to do that. So I hope this opens up some reflection for you, and I'll just open it up for questions for a few minutes, if there are any, or reflections, comments, corrections. Oh, back there. And are we going to use the microphone for this? There's a question back there, and they're recording this, so if you can't hear the question, it's really annoying when you listen to it back. So thank you.
I was thinking about the cone of the Eckhart Tolle cone of, who hates who.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of it in terms of self-love or sending yourself compassion, who's loving who also. And just wondering if you could offer some reflection on that.
Doesn't matter. I mean, in a way, that's my cheap way of getting out of the question, I guess. The teaching in Buddhism, some people, it's often expressed as there is no self. But that's not what the Buddha said. The Buddha just pointed at a lot of things and said, that's not self, and that's not self, and that's not self. So some of the things he said were not self is your body's not yourself, your thoughts aren't yourself, your emotions aren't yourself. But he doesn't sort of answer, is there a self or is there not a self? Because he sort of says, that's not really the important thing to focus on. Just don't get attached to any one thing, basically, and try to call it yourself. So what I can experience when I'm meditating is that there is this aspect of mind which is able to essentially communicate with the rest of my mind, and it's like cognitive therapy, if you've ever done that, where you realize that you're having a thought, and then you have another thought in response to that. I'm sure that somewhere in the Buddhist psychology, there's some kind of analysis of this. It's not quite, I don't know what it is, but I don't think that's, it's not important. The fact is that I can sit here and go, may I be happy. Or I can even just project that feeling towards, if I feel some anxiety, I can kind of bring a calming softness to it. And the fact that I can do that is the important thing. And how that actually works in terms of the brain and consciousness and all of that, there is an answer because it happens. But if I spend my time trying to figure that out, then I'm not doing my practice. So that's kind of where I go with that is one of my teachers, his simple answer to something like that is you don't need to figure it out. If you can learn about it, great. But if it becomes just another proliferation, so better to just let it go. And maybe there's somebody here who has more knowledge of like the Abhidhamma or something who can give you a technical response to that. But for me, there doesn't really need to be an answer. Sorry. Yeah, there's someone down in front here. No, in the front row.
Who's got it?
Right here.
Oh, Laura, yeah, of course.
Thank you for your talk tonight. I'm struggling with anxiety frequently, and I'm trying to be mindful and observe it and not think about the future. But when I plan, anxiety arises. Do you have anything to say to that?
Trying to not think about the future. I don't think that would work. I mean, just trying to not think is already creating more of a problem in a way. So my way of working with, especially anxiety and stronger unpleasant emotions, is to really try to work with them in my body. And because when there's an unpleasant emotion, this is what the Buddha calls the second dart. There's this conflict with it. There's a not liking or aversion to it. And that aversion itself actually feeds it, because I either get into trying to figure out how to get rid of it, or trying to suppress it, trying to think about something else. And what I do is I actually generate more energy around it. And that actually feeds it, or creates kind of another negative emotion on top of it. So if I trust that I can feel this without dying or being overwhelmed, that I can just let this be here without a struggle, then I just breathe with it and feel it as a physical experience, because emotions are primarily actually in the body, in my experience. And so I bring this kind of, it's a trust in mindfulness to a great extent, that I trust my own capacity to feel this. And I also understand that everything is impermanent, so it's got a kind of half-life. It kind of rises, and then if I don't feed it in any way, if I don't think about it or fight with it, if I just allow it to be there, that it passes in a certain, at a certain point. It just can't, nothing can stay forever, no feeling can stay forever. So if I trust that and don't struggle with it and just allow it to come and go, it kind of plays out. It's not pleasant, but there isn't a way that I know of just like flushing it down the toilet. It's kind of like it's here. So mindfulness says if it's here, I need to I don't need to embrace it, but I need to allow it. And that isn't to say that then I'm just going to sit here and go, okay, anxious, feeling. It's like I need to kind of make space for it. And once I've accepted it, which is kind of, I'd say there is an acceptance, that acceptance is actually a kind of loving kindness. There's the allowing it to be there is kind of caring for it. It's not, there's that Buddhist story about the demon that, like the king leaves the palace and the demon, little like frog-like demon hops on the throne, and all his ministers are like, "You got to get off there!" They start yelling at it, and the thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do?" And the king comes back and goes, "Oh, hello, how are you? Are you enjoying my throne? It's so nice to see you. Can I get you a pillow?" And it starts shrinking, and how about a cup of tea? And after a while, it's like, "Oh, okay, great." And it's back to its normal size. So nice you could come and visit, so take care. And the demon just like leaves, because it's like not getting fed. Right? It's not getting fed by negativity. It's a demon that feeds on anger, on negativity. And that's kind of the way our emotions are. So we kind of bring this kindness to them, and they do kind of respond to it. But as I say, and you can also call a friend and go to a meditation group, or go to a meeting, or go to the gym, or go look at the sunset. I mean, we can do positive things too, active positive things that aren't attempts to suppress or get rid of, but that are what the Buddha talks about replacing, bring in something positive. But we have to be very careful when we're replacing, that we're not like, get out of here replacing, but we're just saying, oh, hi, it's okay. Why don't we take a walk down to the beach, and we'll and let the mind shift its gears. Yeah. Thank you. Sit back again for a moment. You can close your eyes. And I love the words that the Buddha says about radiating kindness, so just say those. Radiating kindness over the entire world. spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will. And may our practice together be of benefit to all beings, those we love and those we don't love, those who are suffering and those who are happy. All the beings on this planet and the planet itself, may the planet be healed. May all beings be free from suffering. Thank you so much.